Welcome back to the Bold Moves podcast. This is a crazy time of year. It's that Palm Sunday, Easter week time of year, and it's crazy in the church world. There's a lot going on.
I think it's called Holy Week, actually.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's not just crazy. It's Holy Week. That is correct.
Thanks for clarifying that, because definitely it's crazy for us here working at Crossroads and everything that we're trying to accomplish in the season.
Yes.
Right. I think for most people, it's just another week.
Just another week. Another week for many people, but for us, it is total chaos. It's fantastic.
As we're sitting here recording this, I actually have no idea what our plans are for Easter dinner. There's always some sort of plan. But I'll just say I apologize in advance to the family that I'm going to
yes.
Because I'm going to be exhausted.
Yep, that's how it works. That's how it works for us.
That's one of those things that, like, over the course of the years, I've just realized this is Christmas Eve and Easter. Those are the two biggest times on the calendar for church workers, right? Because that's where more people are willing to come out to church. So it's awesome that we have a chance to connect people with God. But
so I'm thinking outside of if you don't work in a church, like what does Easter week look like for you? Well, for moms, like they're getting all the outfits, they're getting the Easter baskets.
Yeah. It's very exciting.
Pictures with the Easter bunny. Let me tell you about my first Easter as a parent. So I was singing. That's why I wasn't home Easter Sunday morning. Okay. I was singing on the worship team, and my son was 6 months-ish or so at that time. And I thought, like, I was so sad. I was like, no, I want to serve, but I wanted to, like, get my son, like, dressed in his outfit. It was a stressful outfit because I had to buy 2 sizes because his pants needed to be smaller than his shirt. So I had to buy the outfit twice because they sell it as a set. Anyway, so I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to watch on the cameras. Like, we had a baby monitor or whatever up in his room, and I could watch it on my phone. And he screamed, like, getting dressed. Like, he was a baby. And so, like, he didn't like to get dressed. And I was like, oh, I missed nothing, actually. I was so sad. Like, my firstborn. And I was like, I didn't get it.
You watched on the video cam.
Yeah. And I was like, John, I'm sorry.
But John got him dressed and everything was good.
Yeah, John's
he did a good job.
Yep.
He's a good dude. He figured it out. He has this. What's hilarious about Easter season is all the things that you work on that you never would have thought about otherwise. Like the big drama for us leading up to Palm Sunday is we wanted a donkey. Like, we want a donkey at church because we're talking about Palm Sunday and the big deal. So it's hilarious. I remember you guys were there. First time I said, hey, we need a donkey for Palm Sunday. I get looks like, what's Tim talking about? Is this serious?
I think the line was like, we need a donkey for Palm Sunday because that's added value for the people of Crossroads.
Is that how we sell it? Added value is having the donkey.
I don't know how you take that, people of Crossroads, but
I don't know. I don't know. That's really funny. Added value. Why not? We got the Easter egg hunts at Crossroads on Palm Sunday for all the kids. Like, it just creates pandemonium. It's fantastic. But it's all on purpose. It's all to try to connect people with Jesus. And so this week, as we head into our Thursday night service, which will be Easter, and then we'll go right into Friday, which is the Good Friday service, which is a huge whiplash. Like, it's going from celebration to really being somber and reflecting on what Jesus did for us. We then go back to community Easter egg hunts on Saturday, and then Easter Sunday. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait. But my goodness, there's a lot going on. And to your point, Corey, when you finally get to Easter dinner on that Sunday afternoon, it's like,
oh yeah,
I have enough energy to eat, and then I'm out.
Yeah, for the people who don't work at a church, that's like the moment, right? That's the big thing that they're all building up towards.
Yes,
it's the last thing on my checklist, and I have no energy for it.
Yeah,
so
I'm with you on that.
Just to be clear,
that's fantastic. All that being said, let's talk about this for a second because this is important. Palm Sunday, let's not get lost. Jesus, why did we want a donkey? Because he rode in on a donkey, and as weird as that is, that was a fulfilled prophecy. Like, somebody prophesied about that in the Old Testament. That was fulfilled in the life of Jesus coming into Jerusalem, riding on a donkey. I don't know why, but that was a prophecy.
So the vibe then was as awkward as it was when you pitched to us, hey, I think we should have a donkey.
Yeah, it would be just as awkward as the moment where Jesus said, hey, go get a donkey. You're going to find it tied over there. Like, a donkey? Why do we need a donkey? He's like, just get it. The Lord needs it.
We need a donkey.
Yes.
Donkeys play a major role in the Bible.
There's some weird stories with donkeys.
There's some talking donkeys.
There are some talking donkeys. And you have to be careful how you say that and all the jokes that come out of that.
Are you talking about Shrek, or are you talking about...
No, you got to read the story of Balaam in the Old Testament. We're going Old Testament on you, Kristen. That's a good one.
Is that where the story of Shrek came from?
Maybe.
That's possible.
Shrek could have entirely been inspired by the story of Balaam. That is hilarious. Okay, so let's get serious for a moment. When Jesus is riding into Jerusalem on the donkey, it's Palm Sunday, called that because all the people are waving the palm branches and they're yelling Hosanna, which literally, when you break that down, it's just hooray, hooray. And it's a combination of cheering and this statement that salvation is here. Like, hooray, salvation is here. Like they're all basically cheerleaders, and they're acknowledging that Jesus is salvation and salvation is here. So it's actually a really significant moment. And yet the salvation that Jesus offered us was not anything like they anticipated at all. Like it was so much more meaningful. It had eternal value. It was way beyond what they were even dreaming about at that time. And so to think about all that leads up in Palm Sunday, leading up to Easter, and what that means, there's just this realization that Jesus is salvation. And Jesus changes everything. Like, salvation is here. And I was able to talk with my good friend, Dave Roberts, this week. And in just a moment, we're going to have 5 good minutes with Dave. But the reality is there's this truth that we have this amazing story. Like, it's the greatest story ever told of what Jesus has done for us. Like, when we yell and we cheer, salvation is here, Jesus is here, and it changes everything. And so when we encounter Jesus, you guys, we have a story to tell. And Dave Roberts is a good friend who has some great insights on this whole concept. So without further ado, let's give it up for 5 good minutes with my friend, Dave Roberts. Dave, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's so good to have you. Thank you for your time, man.
Of course. Glad to be here.
So we've interviewed other pastors, other friends of mine, and just to be clear, you're one of them, Dave. You're one of them.
One of your colleagues still in ministry? We're so rare.
Easily top 20, top 30 of the 2030 guests we've had, David.
Wow.
No, in all seriousness, Dave, I love you, man. And every time you share something, every time you've done a devotional or spoke, I always just take all these notes, and it ends up being such great content that speaks into so many areas. And so I just appreciate the insight that you have. And one of the things that you've talked about is just the power of our story. And you have a really interesting perspective on that because of where you live. You live out in LA, Hollywood, and give us your perspective on that, because you've got some fascinating insights on that. I'd love to just have a conversation about that.
Well, we live in a part of LA that we get the industry people. We don't necessarily get the stars, but we get the technical people and the background people. And one of the guys that showed up a few years ago is a big-time movie producer. And his name's Ralph Winter, and he produced X-Men and Star Trek, and
amazing.
I mean, so many big movies, and done a lot of faith films too. Bonhoeffer is his latest.
Oh, no kidding!
Did So, but I heard Ralph speak at when he first started coming. He got invited to speak at Willow Creek's leadership summit.
Oh, wow!
And asked if I was going, and I wasn't going, but I thought I should, since he was going to be there, and he went to my church. He went, and what he presented was basically that there's 3 parts to making a movie. There's story, and there's production, and there's marketing.
Right.
And he just said, frankly, we're so good at the production piece and the marketing piece that the story has become much less important to Hollywood. And then he gave examples.
Someone who watches a lot of movies, I would agree with that, Dave.
Yeah,
I see that. Yeah.
It's very formulaic,
Yep.
And then he went into the details of these people that sacrifice their lives for their craft, that their production abilities are so high that, and he used 2 examples. One was in X-Men, there's a scene on the Brooklyn Bridge, and they, applied to New York City to shoot on the Brooklyn Bridge, and New York City said, yeah, we don't do that ever. And so they built
not even for X-Men. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. It was X-Men. Come on.
Deal. And so they rented a parking lot in Vancouver, and they built a 30-foot section of the Brooklyn Bridge.
That's wild.
watch that scene where the fire truck goes over the side. That is all CGI and filmed on this little bridge, this little, section. And he just talks about, people have refined their craft to a point that they can do almost anything with nothing.
That's amazing.
And he talked about the masks from Planet of the Apes. There's only a couple companies in the world that can create a latex mask that can respond to, your facial expressions and
that
one of those.
Is amazing. That's amazing stuff.
Yeah, and one of them is right here in Glendale, right by us. Oh. And they hand tie each of the hairs into the mask for Planet of the Apes. Was the
oh my goodness.
So, and he said, and they do all of that for nothing more than fame and fortune. They sacrifice their families, they sacrifice their health, they sacrifice their lives for their craft.
Yeah.
Then he said, you people in the church, you have the greatest story ever, and you're very bad at production, and you're even worse at marketing.
Jeez.
Yeah. So that hit me hard because we can all acknowledge, that we can't, and I think we can't find the balance, because we do see some churches that, they've gone all in on production, and that's not where we want to be either.
Right. There has to be a balance there. That's exactly right.
Yeah. We're not in the Hollywood world where, we're not going for the ultimate production and the ultimate marketing. It can be slimy and, weird, but you can take to heart that we often put a product out that is not the quality it deserves.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. And, Dave, that's an interesting thing to think about if we have this incredible story, like Hollywood has figured out how to monetize and make a fortune telling terrible stories in a great way. Like if we truly have the best story, and I've always said the greatest story ever told is the story of Jesus coming to planet Earth, God becoming man, saving us. But the second greatest story is how we encountered Jesus. Like that's a great story too, that has a ton of power. And I think as a people, individuals, we need to be ready to share that story too. I think it goes beyond even the walls of the church.
Well, and there's a third aspect, and that is the difference the church is making in the world. And that's a story that is untold. And it's even untold, it's hard to tell your own story in that sense. So I don't feel good about getting up on a Sunday and saying, here's everything we're doing.
Right.
You got to find a subtle way to tell the story. But I don't understand why, as a denomination, we're not better at telling that story, because that is an appropriate place.
Yeah.
And
to celebrate the good things that are happening.
Yeah. We already have the story. We're just not telling. So you guys are in a mission partnership, right?
Yep.
Okay.
We partner with Ecuador.
So I don't understand why, as a denomination, every piece of missions is a partnership where we tell, here are our 5 partnerships for the next 4 years. And as a local church, you can sign into any one of these 5. And here's the story, and here's the video.
Yes.
Here's what's happening, and here's why it matters to you. Because I think people would go, I want to give to that.
Yes.
I want to be a part of that. I will sacrificially give to be a part of that story.
Yes.
We don't tell the story. We don't tell it at all.
And why don't we do that? Like as a denomination, as a church, the larger church, we don't do that. As people, as individuals, why do you think it is that we struggle even to tell our own stories, Dave? I'm curious. Have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, we tell it, and I'm sure you do too, but we tell it in a different way, and that is we tell it so that people can be a part of it. We don't tell it to say congratulations on all the good we're doing in our part of the world and our partnership. But we do say, hey, for us, we say, here's Faith Promise, and here's our partners. Here's our community partners. We're going to take care of Special Olympics and the families that are affected and a part of that community. We're going to take care of women in abusive situations. We're working with kids caught in sex trafficking. We're working with homelessness. We have a variety of community partnerships. And so, we're saying, be a part of this.
Right.
Get Faith Promise, and every dollar is going to pass through our hands into the hands of our partners. Yeah. So we can tell that part of the story.
Yep.
We can't as much stand up on a Sunday and say, congratulations to us. We've done a great job.
Look at what we're doing. Yeah, I get it.
But we do the front end of that,
Yeah.
And and I know, our people will give sacrificially to those visible partnerships.
Yeah.
They don't so much get excited about denominational connections.
Yes.
Which is sad, because we even have this debate on our board. Are those missional partners? Is the general church a missional partner? Is the district a missional partner? And I'm advocating and saying, absolutely, those are missionaries. Yeah. Those are local churches.
They're doing extraordinary things. We just never hear the story. We never hear the story.
And so as a pastor, I have to make it up because I only hear bits and pieces,
Yeah.
So I think that's it. And, I've shared this statistic before. I don't know where I saw it, but 34% of all health care in the world is provided by the Catholic Church.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
34% of... I'm going to fact check that, and we're going to look into that, Dave. That's an incredible number.
Incredible.
That's an incredible number.
But I wonder, I think some smart doctoral student needs to write a thesis on the impact of the Christian church in the world and try to get a broad-based understanding of between all the healthcare, all the advocacy programs, all the, feeding program. What is because we hear about all the damage the church is doing in the world, is doing in the world. What would the world lose? I think the world would have no idea the gaping hole that would be left if faith-based organizations stopped doing what they are doing.
That is an interesting thing to consider because the church does so much good. And to your point, in the headlines, the things that people tend to gravitate toward are all the negative stories, all the failures. And people are human, bad things happen. Those are the things that get the limelight. If we could switch that narrative and the focus of, wow, the church is really doing something extraordinary, it would change the whole dynamic and people would want to be a part of that. Because I think in our culture, people are looking to be a part of something bigger than themselves, I think more than ever before. And when you tie that to the hope that we have in Jesus and the future, the purpose that he has for us, man, that all of a sudden gets some real legs. That creates an awakening. People want to be a part of that, and lives are changed.
Yeah, and I think that reality of, we can live on faith, and we do, but we're all going to have those days when we're like, is this real? Is God real? And I want to be able to say to my congregation, you're making a real difference in the world today, right now, in very practical ways, in your community and around the world, and that matters. And whatever the other God piece of eternity, and that's going to be what it is in God's hands, and we trust it, and we believe in it, and we live towards it. But we're doing both, faith and practice. And I think that matters to the health of a congregation.
Yeah, I think that's a good word. Dave, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. That's a great perspective. And my man, the fact that you, the pastor to the stars, took time to talk with us on the Bold Moves podcast. Thank you. You're the man.
Wow. Well, it's an honor. So thank you. Thanks for having me on, man.
I'm so thankful for Dave, for his friendships, but also for the insights that he has there. There's some really interesting things to consider there. I can never shake. I've heard him talk about that content a couple times about the dynamics of Hollywood, how they don't really have great stories, but they can market it really well. They got great special effects, and so they can still do pretty well and make some money. But you guys, we have the greatest story, and we don't do a good job of telling it and letting people know what God is doing, not only just individually, but as a church. Like we have to be telling people the same way people were on Palm Sunday. Hooray! Yeah. Hosanna! Salvation is here. We've got to tell the story. And man, to what he was saying, Hollywood, they don't have very good stories anymore. There's just not a lot of good stories, but they market it well. Are you guys movie people? You know what I'm talking about?
Have you ever seen a preview for a movie and they tell you the entire movie, or they have like all the funny parts in the preview, and then you go and see the movie and you're like, I've seen that.
Yes, I already saw everything that was good in that movie in the preview. Yes.
That's so annoying.
But yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I just think of
marketing, Hollywood marketing.
We don't go to very many movies, honestly, but when you do go to the movies, you sit down and you watch 5, 6, 7 previews before the movie gets started, like 2-3 minute clips.
Yep.
And I just think it's funny, like the marketing of it. What happens naturally is everybody in the room, they watch this preview, it stops, and then they turn and whisper to their neighbor, yeah, I would go see that. That looks like a good one. Or, no way, that looks terrible. That's the marketing, right?
Yes.
In a 2-minute clip, they get us to spend our money and go see, I got to see what's going to happen in that story.
So when they don't have good stories, like somehow they've been able to get away with that for a long time. Now, to be clear, recently we've seen it in the headlines. I think it's catching up to Disney. They're not able to get away. with the bad stories anymore. No. They're putting out some flops recently. They're going to have to get better. But when you have a good story, to be clear, when you have a good story and the movie is made well and like all three things come together, that's a powerful moment. I will never forget watching the first of the final two movies of the Avengers, how it all comes together. And he gets to the end of the first one and everybody starts vanishing. They're all dying. And spoiler alert, if you didn't see that movie 8 years ago, they all die. They all die. But I was in the movie theater watching that, and as the people start to disappear, as they start to die, the lady sitting directly next to me just started weeping, like loudly weeping and going, "No!" And as different characters were dissolving, she's just getting worse and more worked up. No! Like, it was wild to me how emotionally engaged she was in that moment. So when you have... I remember in the middle of that being so like distracted by that and amused. I was like, Dana, check this. This is awesome. Like, I kind of missed that moment because of her, but she
became the story for you.
She became the story. Yeah. And it was great. Here I am talking about it years later. It was awesome. But if you have the story, like, I guess the point of that is if you have the story, it creates an amazing moment. And man, you guys, we have the story of salvation. We have the story of Jesus. It's the greatest story ever told. And I think that we are wise to consider, how are we telling that story? Like, not just sharing our story personally, but how are we living that out? How are we engaging people with the story? Because that story is still alive. It is moving. It is working. It is still the greatest story ever told. So how do we get involved in that story and share that story as effectively as possible? I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, one thing about the Bible, this is actually true of almost all stories. Like, if you go and watch a movie, time doesn't always like elapse in a linear way. So like, you go long periods of time that you don't see what happens in the story because it's just not as impactful, as important. Yeah. But there's always like that crucial moment, like the crucial moment in the movie or in the story that like we are spending 80% of the time talking about what's happening in this short little stretch of time. Yep. And I just think about too, like the story of Jesus and all the events that led up to his death. Yeah. As we started today talking about Palm Sunday. Yeah. And when you actually think about the craziness of a week, what can happen in a week, that Jesus is riding in on that donkey. Yep. Everybody's celebrating.
He is a hero.
Yeah. He is absolutely, and he knows in his mind, he knows what's about to happen. Yep. But in just a few days, literally 4 days, 3, 4, 5 days, whatever it is, he is going to be killed on a cross.
Yes.
Because that crowd that cheered for him so much, flipped it on its head. Yeah. And now they're yelling for him to be crucified. Yes. That's an impactful moment in that story. Yeah. And the entire week of Palm Sunday and then the 3 days of Jesus' death and resurrection, man, there's so much time spent on that in the Bible, and rightfully so, because that is, like you say, it's the greatest story ever told. Yeah. And it's not a fictional story. It's not a Thanos snap and people are like disappearing.
That's a good pull. That's a good pull though, Corey. I like that.
But instead, it's what actually happened on Earth. Yes. And it's so compelling that 2,000 plus years later, we're still talking about it, and it's still changing people's lives. Yes. And man, you're exactly right. That's the greatest story ever told. And we have to figure out ways as the church to tell that story to impact more people.
And to be that story. I mean, I loved what Dave was saying too, just about the church. I think people take for granted the church and the value that adds to every community around the world. God uses the church to continue telling that story. And so, man, I'm challenged in this moment and in my conversation with Dave to just be clearly focusing on what I can do to not only be a part of the story that Jesus is moving and working in my life, but to share that story with as many people as possible, because it is it is the greatest story ever told, and it's still unfolding in real time. Right. Like we get to be a part of this. So I just want you to lean in. If you're listening or watching the podcast today, lean in to the greatest story ever told. Lean into what Jesus has done in your life, what he is doing, and don't be afraid, don't be ashamed to share that story. In fact, think about how you are going to engage in that story and share that story, because man, I believe with all my heart it's the greatest story ever told. And then how we encounter Jesus, how he's impacting our life, that's the second greatest story ever told. No one can take that away from you. So let's lean into that. Let's be storytellers and let everybody know that Jesus is alive and this is real. And to your point, Corey, it changes everything. It does, and it still happens. So as we enter into Holy Week, and we've already celebrated Palm Sunday, which, hooray, we did it. That's fantastic.
You think when they were waving palm branches, they were like, hip, hip, Hosanna.
Oh, my goodness. Kristen? Possible. No, I don't think that they were, but that is awesome. Thank you for saying.
Do you think they were like, give me a J. Give me a...
No, I don't. I think they were just waving.
That's like their pom-poms, right? The palm branches?
I like that you're leaning into that. Like, who's that Indian in my TP? It's me. It's me. It's that kind of thing. Yeah.
Be aggressive.
No, Kristen. I think they were just saying Hosanna.
Okay, whatever. That's fine. I'm here for it. It's a great story.
Thank you. It's so good.
And then Jesus pops his head out. It's me.
That's exactly how it went on. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for full circle. That's beautiful. Yeah. Okay. So it's Holy Week. Let's get serious. Okay,
well, we've had Palm Sunday.
Like That's true. They've been celebrating. Salvation is here. You guys, it's the greatest story ever told. Yeah. And this week, as we lean into that, we celebrate Good Friday. We reflect on the sacrifice that Jesus made for us, and then celebrate the resurrection, that he is alive. Let's just remember, it's the greatest story ever told. And let's play our part in letting that story be told, because people need to hear it. It changes everything. That's a bold move. Let's make it together. We'll see you next time.